Okay, so this one is about the nature of importance. And importance is, it's a subtle thing. And I think I particularly want to hone in on the difference between importance and uniqueness. They don't seem like the same word, but there are some similarities. But uniqueness really, and this is what I want to illuminate, is how they're very close to each other, but how one of them can kind of evolve into the other. So when you're a child, your parents are, this is a stereotypical scenario, that child goes to primary school, they get picked on for something about their character that's unique, and they come home and they talk to the parent about the bully's bullying me for some aspect of my character that's unique. And then the parent tries to tell you that you're special and that that part of you is beautiful, that being unique is what makes you you, it's what makes you special. And the problem is, you go back to school, you're still getting picked on and bullied. And so in one of these scenarios, you're at the school, you're the child getting bullied at school. And all you want to do is you want to feel safe. Of course. So you want the bullying to stop. And so you're going to try and mask whatever that character trait is. You're going to try and mask that uniqueness so that you stop getting bullied. So your parents are right, of course. Your uniqueness is what makes you beautiful. Or it's the aspect of your nature that needs to be illuminated and nurtured and appreciated the most. And it's not like you've just got one of these things. You're utterly unique. But here's the thing: no one cares. No one cares, because your uniqueness is worthless if it's hidden. It's utterly worthless if it's hidden. You could be the most gifted concert pianist who's ever lived. Unless you're playing the piano, then it's a completely worthless aspect of your nature. So it is unimportant. All of the uniqueness within everyone's body is entirely unimportant. It's completely worthless. It exists as pure potential. And so many of us, especially children, are walking around in the world feeling like nobody cares about them. Nobody loves them. No one thinks they're special. And it's because they're not. And the reason that we're not special is because we're masking our uniqueness. And so it's important to figure out that you're only special if you are proactively appreciating your uniqueness. I could really kind of just end the podcast there, because this is where you see it segues into importance. Now, when something becomes important, it's because of some kind of utility that's being provided. If you're building a house, it's important to have a blueprint. It's important to have foundations. If you omit any of those important components, then you can't really build a house, can you? And it's the same with a human being. Your quest in life really needs to be about how you can not only appreciate your own uniqueness, nurture it, grow it, experiment with it, the least it will allow it to be seen. But the key is to understand that uniqueness to such a depth that you're utilizing it in ways where it is you are participating, utilizing that uniqueness in a way that's important to some other system. So a foundation of a house is important to the house. Your uniqueness is important to some other system that you're a part of, whether it's some kind of collaboration, some kind of organization, group, family unit. And I think a lot of people get confused about, you see it's quite common with the younger generations at the moment where this sense or this feeling of self-importance, they feel as though they should be considered special and unique and important, but you're only important once you've made yourself important. You're only important once you've discovered a way for your uniqueness to be important. And it isn't important until it's important. And all of a sudden, when you have figured out how to become important to other people, to other systems, organizations, you'll find that those systems will protect you, they'll take care of you, they will look after you, they'll want you to thrive because you're important. So, this is also linked in many ways to entitlement. Many people feel entitled in this world. They feel entitled to be looked after and taken care of and all these things, but they haven't figured out how to become important to the ecosystem that they're a part of yet. And really, this is the challenge for a parent, is to this is why it is so important to understand and identify the uniqueness of a child, to nurture it, but more importantly, to figure out how to help that child to become important. If you become important to the organization you're a part of, then you'll be looked after. If you're unimportant to the organization you're part of, you won't be looked after. This is, you can't blame another human being for this. This is an aspect of nature itself. Every ecosystem in nature behaves this way. Everything within an ecosystem that is unimportant to that ecosystem is reconstituted. It decays and it is reconstituted into something that can be important. And, so blaming a human being for this is absolutely pointless. Blaming some other human being for the lack of care you're receiving, for the lack of, how valued you are and whether you're appreciated or not. Blaming that on another human being is really makes no sense. Because if you make yourself important, then you will be looked after and cared for and appreciated. It's nature. So, what I would suggest is, if you are someone who feels unimportant or feels as though you're not appreciated, the reason for that is very, very simple. It's because the thing that you're trying to be appreciated for or noticed for is not important to the person that you're wanting to appreciate you. And a common one I come across is because I work with people who invest money into projects, and it's quite common that people, they sometimes feel as though I'm not appreciating their investment, and it's true. It's true, but it's just a matter of perspective, because the problem I'm trying to solve is I'm trying to find people who are capable of deploying capital. So it's not, I'm not approaching it from the perspective of can you give me money for this venture? I'm approaching it from the perspective of that, I've spent most of my life coming up with a system to that enables investors to deploy their capital that would otherwise be sitting there depreciating in a bank, or sitting in an index fund. So I don't I see it from the perspective that I've spent my life investing my time and energy into solving a problem for people who have capital. And this is a very interesting mindset, where people, they just assume that if they're providing money for something, they're assuming that the person receiving it should be appreciative because it's money rather than a skill or time or expertise or whatever it may be. It's a very interesting perspective, and I think it's just very common. I see people who have capital, and their biggest challenge is how to deploy that capital in ways that are meeting an unmet need, and therefore yielding, having a positive yield, preferably 10% plus annually on their capital investment. But even still, when you're providing a mechanism for them to be able to do that, that's perfect for them, they feel like they're doing you the favor because they're giving you money. And that's the thing. Importance. For someone like me who at this moment in time has got multiple connections with lots of different funds and different kinds of investors and things, there's an abundance of people who can provide capital. And so the importance of money to someone like me is low. And, I deliberately do this in everything that I create. If, as someone like me, I design wealth generating vehicles. So I look at someone's assets and I say, okay, what's the ideal way to appreciate these assets? What's the ideal business model? What is the ideal, cost of acquisition, cost of service? What are the margins we need to be working with so that this can become a scalable asset that continues appreciating in perpetuity? What is the organizational structure that we need to support that? What are the expertise and skills these people need? What are the resources they require? What are the third-party relationships that they need to be actively engaged in? And I create a blueprint. And so within these blueprints that I'm creating, obviously they're based on nature. I'm always seeking to make everything within it less important. If something becomes too important, then sometimes you feel compelled to utilize it because there's a lack of other options. So there's a scarcity versus an abundance mindset there. So as an example, in the beginning, it's pretty common for someone to only have one investor backing their project. And, that's a massive issue. because that investor feels as though they are the most important person in the entire vehicle. But in a scenario where all of a sudden you have, let's say you get past the first phase of you built the prototype, you market validated it, and you're ready to launch and scale, and now you need to invest in a team and bulletproofing the platform, these kinds of things, then is to receive funding from multiple sources. And so what you do in that scenario is all of a sudden, because you've got 5 or 6 different options and different sources, none of them are critically important, and you've got options. And so that leverage that I think lots of them are used to having this leverage and being the only investor. All of a sudden that leverage that they're used to having is no longer in place. And so it becomes about the value. They can focus on the value that they want to derive from the deal rather than trying to hold a sense of obligation over you for, you should be so grateful because I'm giving you money. So, this is how I want to demonstrate, the meaning of importance. And, in terms of meeting an unmet need, that's one way to become extremely important very quickly and to gain leverage. The more important you are, the more leverage you have. It's just a fact. It's an aspect of nature the more important you are, the more that nature is folding in around you to take care of you. It's just one of those realities. And the only way to remain important, in a state of perpetuity, is to be continually reinventing yourself. Because once you become important, the DNA of what enabled you to be important can be replicated, and they will be replicated. It's inevitable. And the more carbon copy versions of you that there are, then the less important you become. And so reinvention is the only true way to remain important and to therefore hold on to your leverage. And so even in what I typically advise people about who, because my expertise is, appreciating assets in a business sense. And so I understand the cycles. I've seen it all before, measured the bell curves, experimented with different algorithms, decision-making algorithms. And what I say is to imagine your progress as a bell curve, and then take that bell curve and copy and paste it. So you've got a sine wave, up and down and up and down and up and down. But rather than seeing it as a flat line, see it having a trajectory. So it's a bell curve that's angled upwards for however many degrees that progress is. I would typically, there's a very interesting, for 15 years I've been doing this. There's a very interesting figure that I always seem to get to once I've optimized a wealth generating vehicle. And that figure is 11.5%. And so when I hit the sweet spot and I get a wealth generating vehicle, and this is a scenario where the vehicle is so efficient and optimized, where it's not only capable of appreciating assets, but also of preservation of assets as well as reconstitution of assets, and it's self-perpetuating. And you get it to a point where you can really go into it and pull out additional top line if you ever need it, and it will just self-correct over time. Once you get a wealth generating vehicle to that point, there's this figure of, for me personally, this figure of 11.5% compounding month on month, but it's as an average. And so this is where culture comes in. So this is the thing about nature and about evolution and about, perpetual systems, is that it's continually reinventing itself. So you can't come up with the ultimate and put it in place and then just leave it. You have to overlay culture over the top of it, and that culture is the behaviour that drives the machine. And in this particular scenario, the culture is a combination of the process of acquisition, so generating a lead, converting that lead, making sure the cost of that acquisition is at a specific rate and understanding that, then appreciating that asset, having a process and a culture for determining whether this asset can continue appreciating. Is there greater opportunity within that asset, and at what moment is the right moment to reconstitute this asset or to cull it completely? And then the preservation of an asset. How do we value an asset? How do we protect that asset in perpetuity? And all of that culture overlaid over the machine is what enables it to continually reinvent itself, looking at each individual asset in isolation, but always seeking to bond it to other assets in order to create something entirely new, and therefore extremely important, and therefore providing leverage. Importance equals leverage, and that's a very important, it's very simple. It's not really an algorithm. It's just an equation, really. Importance equals leverage. So if you're finding you're lacking leverage, just ask yourself, how can I become more important to my customer, to the industry that I'm a part of, to the value chain that is, taking the raw material of what I'm involved with producing, and taking it from raw material through to production, distribution and consumption. How can I become more important to the value chain? How can I become more important to the customer, to the industry, to my community, to my family, to the city, to the region, to the nation, to the planet? If you are lacking leverage, seek to become more important, and the way you become more important is through reinvention of the self. And it's the same for your business, it's the same for your products. And so that bell curve, you want continual rapid progress. And here's one of my golden tricks, because I've got this down to a fine art at this point. With the bell curve, you when you're making rapid progress and you've got compounding growth, the moment that it begins to show signs of not leveling off, but going into the curve of the bell at the top of the curve, that is the moment you begin the process of reinvention. And I mean total reinvention from the perspective of, okay, if I was looking at this asset now, like let's say it's the growth curve of an asset that you're appreciating, and it's been compounding, and it's about to begin curving and begin its downward descent, or moving towards some kind of plateau. Then you say to yourself, you look at that asset and say, if I was to create another asset to compete with this asset, that would not only render this asset obsolete, but increase the rate of growth or compounding effect of this asset, what would I do? What would it look like? How would the business model change? How does the industry value chain need to change? How much more leverage do I need in the industry value chain? And the process of reinvention continues. You obviously don't have to recreate the asset all the time, but you are continually sculpting it, refining it, and reinventing it, and making it more and more important to the value chain that it participates within. And when you zoom out and you look at the asset that you're wanting to appreciate in the context of the industry value chain that it's involved within, what you want to be doing is looking at how it can become even more important to the industry value chain that it operates within. How can you get more leverage, and how can you render other assets that it's competing against within that industry value chain? How can you render those obsolete through perpetual reinvention? And when it's compounding, you've got that compounding growth happening. That's when you're taking a breath and preparing yourself for another period of reinvention. And so this is how you create importance. This is how you become important. And it is by being unique, but it's by finding the utility of that uniqueness and therefore becoming important. Once you're important, it's then utilizing the leverage that you've gained from that importance, and continually reinventing yourself so that you continually remain important, and therefore negating the issue of others replicating your DNA in order to make you more abundant, or your importance less valuable, less important. Perpetual and continual reinvention. And that's the magic sauce. So if you've mastered the art of designing wealth generating vehicles, and you've experimented as much as I've had to get all of these little tidbits, you come to the point where there's nothing really that you can't apply this to. There's no form of asset that you can't apply it to. You just need to make sure that you have a vehicle that's capable of providing you with everything you need in order to make informed decisions on how to adapt and evolve and to change and reinvent. But it's lots of fun. So I'm very excited about the phase we're in at the moment, where the software platform I've designed to spawn wealth generating vehicles, in perpetuity, that can enable anyone to design and build a wealth generating vehicle and business model around any kind of asset, just with a few clicks of a button. And I've got an ecosystem. I've built up an ecosystem of people with the right expertise, skills, and resources that are pretty much capable of taking anything from a concept, like an idea, through to a prototype, and then through to a full-blown scalable product and supported. And so there's pretty much nothing that we can't create viably at the moment, as long as it ticks all those boxes all the way through. So hopefully that's demonstrated it. I'll leave it there. So the takeaway is, importance equals leverage. The opposite of leverage is insignificance, really. If you're not important, you're insignificant. You're not special. And if you're not important, you're not being taken care of, you're not being cared for. And so it's okay to want to be important. And it's even okay to wish that we were more important to the people around us, to the people that love us. But the only true way to be important and therefore cared for in the way that you really want to be cared for is to continually seek to find new ways to become more and more important to the people and the systems, or to the people around you and the systems that you're a part of and participating in. Okay, I'll leave it there. That's all for now for the nature of importance. Talk soon.